parted white ghosts vested with spiritual powers whose descendants were priests and magicians. Navajo legends speak of the Star-Nape people, a regal race of white giants endowed with mining technology who dominated the West, enslaved lesser tribes and had strongholds all through the Americas. The remains support legends of this race of giants having multiple sets of teeth, and having been over 10 feet in height. The remains have been officially exhumed, but alas not officially covered in the press. It is as if we are now at a point of paradigm destruction. Artifacts that tell of such beings are no longer successfully hidden, they are now just ignored. Following some archaeological evidence found regarding this giant race, they practiced a mother goddess religion. They possessed copper, not bronze, axes. Polished slate tools have been found, including fishing plummets, which were apparently regarded as sacred. Belief that the grandmother moon was the repository of souls, a diet of mainly shellfish and seafood. The building of fish weirs on North American rivers to trap migrating eels. This is a form of fishing known as elvering, but due to plummeting stocks it is now widely regarded as detrimental to the ecosystem. Certain vegetarian habits, wild rice, for instance, inscriptions on artifacts, especially pipes, often buried with the dead, use of coal and petroleum, weaving and looms, knowledge of seafaring, mathematics and engineering, including canals and irrigation, burying of a dog with a child to guard the latter in the afterlife, a language apparently Afro-Asiatic and close to Semitic tongues, and kingcraft. Nobles were buried in seated positions on thrones surrounded by a coterie of their retainers. They also had flatter heads and 6 fingers and toes. Were these giants highly advanced? Did they build the pyramids? There is also many contradictory tales across the earth, which speak of primitive, cannibalistic beasts, enslaved and used for their strength, yet no legend has ever been corroborated with such compelling archaeology as the Moon-Eyed people of Ohio. Where these races of giants came from, or indeed where they went, is a question which needs to be answered.
Georgios Tsoukalos goes deep.
The only way the ancient astronaut theory can be disproven is when the extraterrestrials show up and say we were never here in the past.
The awe-inspiring ancient city of Hegra, also known as Madain Saleh, close sister of the equally astonishing and cinematically famous ancient site of Petra, is now finally open to the public, able to go and investigate for themselves. We have covered this site, and indeed the gigantic scale of the rock-cut temples, the claimed tombs, and tall doorways to enter these sites. Furthermore, we have covered uncanny similarities found upon rare, unfinished areas of these once astonishingly precisely cut, solid rock ruins. In addition to the enormous scale of the stone-cut buildings, and the absence of doorsteps, which would have enabled the now average-sized human claimed as having created them, no chance of entering them with ease. This giving credence to the many theories pertaining to these gigantic structures, along with their gigantic scales and their enormous megalithic counterparts found at other sites, linked to by cutting marks previously mentioned, were instead constructed by an ancient, now lost race, far larger than any of today, one capable of these incredible ancient feats. Could these structures have instead of, as so many, as indeed we have postulated, not actually built by ancient man, but were actually made by ancient giants? Not only with the muscular ability to have once lifted such enormous stones into position, such as that of the enormous megalithic stones incorporated into the Great Pyramids of Giza, found within the temples of Baalbek, Gornia Shoria, but also almost globally? Could this explain how they were once able to liberate these giant stones from the quarries and bedrocks selected almost many miles from where they were eventually placed with seeming ease? How they were somehow transported, enormous stones high atop mountains, assembling them into the remarkably precise laid polygonal masonry that now drenches the tops of Peruvian peaks? How they once raised the ancient obelisk of Aswan? But I digress. Many have now conceded that the methodology of the Great Pyramids of Giza construction continues to be an enigma in regards to a modern explanation as to how the modern man accomplished such feats. Could this mystery be linked to the cover-up in which many have claimed and we ourselves encountered in regard to the remains of this possibly lost civilization smothered by the Smithsonian, one that we would now perceive as ancient giants? It is a hypothesis which would indeed be a fitting explanation for these mysteries and a cover-up, the stifling of a reason for their continued inexplicability to modern explanation. It is a theory which we find incredibly intriguing. It is now a well-known, heavily studied fact that the modern-day bird was once a very different-looking animal, evolution in the form of a radical transformational adaptation, forced upon them by gradual changes in the Earth's environment, from which they whence came, that being the dinosaur. We now know this to be fact thanks to modern technology. Our capability to now scan these fossils, some found remarkably well preserved, still fortunately containing many things, which have allowed us to discover that dinosaurs had bird brains, or more accurately, birds have dinosaur brains. With current investigations even shining light upon the reality that many of these gigantic animals, including the T-Rex, once had manes made of feathers. This drastic change from the dinosaur, resulting in the vast array of creatures we see today, from the ostrich to the albatross, even to the commonly domesticated budgerigar. Yet they all share one common trait: a significant reduction in their size. Even animals which survived unchanged, such as the crocodile, still shrank considerably. This shrinking of said species having been demanded of them by environmental changes. Evolutionary adaptation, as we have covered in the past, is, in the channel's opinion, in its true sense, an adaptation of specific sets of vertebrate types, the true definition of species, not as Darwinian theory posits, of leaps between such. Thus, evolution witnessed within the animal kingdom is not indicative of a shared single ancestry, but inseparable branching from specific vertebrae or phyla groups, never proven to have leaped from one to another. As such, modern-day birds could in fact be seen as the product of de-evolutionary adaptation. This loss of size would in all probability have also resulting in a deterioration in their intellectual potential, this being due to the considerable decrease in brain mass, possibly derived from cataclysm, which deprived them of the resources needed to remain at such gigantic sizes. The reason for this digression is the channel's postulation of this same process, having once possibly occurred to Homo sapiens also. Could this explain why some of the oldest ruins are also some of the most advanced, with many remaining beyond the reach of modern man's ability to understand them? Is it possible that man once had a much higher intellect than us today, due to a far greater sized cranium? Simply put, were we once giants, just as modern-day birds were once dinosaurs? Legends and accounts of ancient giants can be found all over the world, also featuring in many ancient religious teachings. Additionally, many of the still unexplained sites of Earth regularly feature doorways many feet, sometimes even meters above that which is required by and for humans of our modern scale. The Terracotta Army, for example, is believed by many independent researchers, including Mystery History, to have been made by a lost civilization, and their average height, intriguingly, is much taller than modern man. Many accounts exist of giants, which share similar descriptive characteristics: red hair, double-rowed teeth, elongated skulls, etc. With many accounts of red-headed giant remains actually discovered and excavated all over the world, yet often all that survives of these reported events is a small news article, regularly noting Smithsonian involvement in said recoveries, yet seemingly and conveniently always slipping away from the public domain. Lovelock Cave being another example. Locals tell of it once being the home of a group of red-headed giants, which was eventually blocked and the giants burnt alive. A giant handprint still visible on a rock in the cave, presumably made by one of these individuals during